What if I told you that one of the most common emergency surgeries in the world might not actually be necessary? Yes, I'm talking about that tiny worm-shaped organ hiding in your gut, the appendix. For decades, we've been told it's useless, a leftover from evolution, nothing more than a ticking time bomb waiting to burst. But what if that story isn't true? What if your appendix has been hiding a secret purpose all along? And the way we've been treating appendicitis might not be the whole truth. Think about it. Hundreds of thousands of people get their appendix removed every single year. Surgeons claim it's the safest way, the final solution, but new research suggests there may be another path. A path that challenges everything we thought we knew about medicine, about risk, and even about trust in the system. Welcome to the Wellness Way, where we don't just accept the official story, we dig deeper. In today's video, you're going to discover what your appendix really does, why it sometimes turns deadly, and whether surgery is truly the only answer. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into a truth that could change the way you see your own body forever. Most of us grow up believing the appendix is a useless little pouch inside our gut. Doctors, teachers, even TV shows make it sound like a leftover mistake of evolution. A ticking time bomb that serves no purpose until it gets inflamed and forces you into emergency surgery. I used to think the exact same thing. In fact, when I first heard that someone had their appendix removed, my only thought was, well, at least it's gone. They didn't need it anyway. But the more I learned, the more that simple story started to crumble. The appendix isn't just sitting there doing nothing. Recent discoveries suggest it might actually play a role in protecting our health, quietly, invisibly, without most of us even noticing. And that revelation shocked me, because if the appendix isn't useless, then what else about the human body have we misunderstood? Here's what we now know. The appendix is filled with lymphatic tissue, the same kind of tissue that fuels your immune system. It acts like a checkpoint, monitoring the bacteria that move through your large intestine. Even more fascinating, scientists have suggested that the appendix serves as a kind of safe house for the good bacteria in your gut. Imagine you're hit with a nasty case of food poisoning or diarrhea that wipes out your gut microbiome. Where do those helpful bacteria come from to rebuild your system? The appendix might be the hidden backup drive, quietly storing them until you need them again. Now, does that mean you can't live without it? No. People who have their appendix removed still go on to live normal, healthy lives. But to call it useless, that's an oversimplification. And in medicine, oversimplifications can be dangerous. They shape the way we think, the way we treat illness, and sometimes even the way we decide who gets surgery and who doesn't. Think about how many appendectomies, surgical removals of the appendix, are performed every year. In the United States alone, we're talking about nearly 250,000. That's a staggering number. And for decades, the narrative has been, you get appendicitis, you get surgery. Case closed. But now, new research is showing that surgery may not be the only answer. That's where things get really interesting and really controversial. Because if antibiotics alone can sometimes treat appendicitis, then why are so many people still rushed into surgery? Is it because surgery is truly the safest, most reliable choice? Or is it because the medical system is built to favor surgical intervention over conservative treatment? These are uncomfortable questions, but they're worth asking. When I first came across the idea that appendicitis might be treated with just antibiotics, my immediate reaction was disbelief. It sounded like one of those internet health myths that people share on forums but doctors dismiss. then I looked closer. I found studies, including a large one published in 2015, showing that a significant percentage of patients with uncomplicated appendicitis, meaning their appendix wasn't ruptured and there was no abscess, were able to recover with antibiotics alone. They avoided the operating room entirely. That blew my mind. For the first time, I had to consider the possibility that what I'd always accepted as medical fact wasn't the full picture, and it forced me to confront a bigger idea. Medicine is not just about facts written in stone. It's about evolving knowledge, changing practices, and challenging old assumptions. Let me pause here and emphasize something. I'm not saying that surgery is unnecessary. Far from it. Appendectomy has saved countless lives, and when the appendix bursts or develops complications, surgery is the only option. But what this new evidence tells us is that we may need to rethink the all-or-nothing approach we've had for so long. Here's the part that really got me thinking. If the appendix does serve an immune function, if it really helps preserve the gut microbiome, then what are we losing every time we remove it? Sure, most people don't notice a difference, but could there be subtle effects, long-term impacts that we haven't fully studied yet? The human body is incredibly complex, and often, when we dismiss something as unnecessary, it's only because we haven't yet understood its deeper role. And that brings me back to the personal perspective. Imagine being a patient, sitting in a hospital bed, writhing in pain, told you have appendicitis. The surgeon comes in and says, "We'll take it out and you'll be fine." It's the standard of care. Most people don't question it. But what if instead you were offered a choice? What if you were told, "We can try antibiotics first, it might work, but there's also a chance you'll end up back here later needing surgery anyway"? Would you take that chance to avoid the knife, or would you go straight for the certainty of removal? There's no easy answer, but it's a question that reveals just how much grey area exists in medicine, an area where personal values, risk tolerance, and trust in science all collide. That's why the appendix fascinates me, not just because it's a quirky little organ with a misunderstood past, but because it represents the clash between tradition and innovation, between what we think we know and what the evidence is starting to show. It forces us to ask whether we've been too quick to dismiss what we don't understand. So the next time someone tells you the appendix is just a useless leftover, remember this. The truth is far more complicated. It might be small, it might be quiet, but the appendix has a story worth listening to, and that story could change the way we think about surgery, medicine, and even the resilience of the human body itself. Let me take you inside a moment that countless patients around the world have faced. You're sitting in an emergency room. Hours ago, it was just stomach pain, annoying but manageable. Now it's sharper, lower, and relentless. You've lost your appetite. You feel feverish. A doctor runs tests, maybe an ultrasound or a CT scan, and then comes back with the words you didn't expect to hear. You have appendicitis. Your heart drops. You've heard the stories. For most people, appendicitis means one thing: surgery. The doctor explains that the standard treatment is to remove your appendix, and it can be done quickly, often with tiny incisions using laparoscopic tools. Within a couple of weeks, you'd be back to normal life. That sounds reassuring. But then, maybe the doctor adds, in some cases, antibiotics can treat appendicitis without surgery. Suddenly, the room feels heavier. You're no longer dealing with just a diagnosis. You're facing a choice. Do you take the scalpel or the pills? This is the dilemma at the heart of modern medicine's ongoing debate about appendicitis, and it's not as simple as it seems. Antibiotics first gained attention as a possible alternative after several clinical trials, most notably the 2015 APAC trial, showed that uncomplicated appendicitis, cases where the appendix wasn't ruptured, no abscess had formed, and no signs of severe infection were present, could often be treated successfully with intravenous and oral antibiotics. For about 60–70% of patients, the infection cleared up, the appendix calmed down, and surgery was avoided, at least in the short term. For those patients, it was life-changing. No operating table, no general anesthesia, no recovery period, just medication, rest, and eventually relief. But here's where the story twists. About 20–30% of those patients experienced recurring appendicitis within a year. Some came back to the ER weeks later. Others lasted months before the pain returned. In the end, they needed surgery anyway. So let's weigh this out. The case for antibiotics. For patients, the appeal is obvious. Avoiding surgery means less immediate risk. Even though appendectomy is considered safe, surgery always carries potential complications, infection, bleeding, or reactions to anesthesia. For people who are young, healthy, and terrified of hospitals, antibiotics feel like a gentler, less invasive solution. It also means lower upfront costs and less time away from work or school. The catch. The trade-off is uncertainty. Choosing antibiotics is like taking a gamble. Will you be in the lucky 70% who never need surgery, or the unlucky 30% who suffer through appendicitis twice and end up under the knife anyway? Imagine going through that anxiety, wondering if every stomachache in the future is your appendix acting up again. The case for surgery. On the other hand, surgery is definitive. Once your appendix is gone, it's gone. No more worries about recurrence. Modern laparoscopic appendectomy is efficient, often completed in about 30 minutes. Recovery times are fast and serious complications are rare. From a surgeon's perspective, it's a clean solution, a problem solved once and for all. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Not every appendix removed truly needed to be removed. Some patients with mild, uncomplicated cases may have done just fine with antibiotics. The medical community has long erred on the side of caution, preferring to operate quickly rather than risk a rupture. Why? Because a ruptured appendix is a nightmare scenario. When it bursts, bacteria and pus flood the abdominal cavity, leading to peritonitis, a life-threatening infection. In that moment, the difference between survival and tragedy can come down to hours. And so most doctors don't take chances. They recommend surgery because it eliminates the risk of rupture. From their point of view, it's better to operate too soon than to wait too long. Now let's add another layer. Trust. When patients hear that antibiotics might work but surgery is pushed as the default, it raises suspicions. Some wonder if the medical system favors surgery because it's more profitable. Others believe doctors are simply trained to cut first and ask questions later. I don't think it's that simple. Surgeons are not villains twirling scalpels in the operating room. They're making decisions in high-stakes situations where hesitation could cost lives. But it's fair to say that the system is shaped by tradition, liability concerns, and a culture that values certainty. This is where my personal reflection comes in. If I were the patient sitting in that hospital bed, would I choose antibiotics or surgery? I've thought about it a lot. On one hand, I hate the idea of losing an organ, even one considered non-essential. Also, on the other hand, I hate the thought of lying awake at night, wondering if my appendix will flare up again. For me, I'd probably lean towards surgery, not because I don't believe in antibiotics, but because I value closure. I'd rather face one difficult decision than live in constant fear of another emergency. But I also recognize that not everyone thinks like me. Some people would rather take the chance with antibiotics, grateful to avoid the operating room altogether. And that's the beauty and frustration of this debate. Both options have merit, and neither is perfect. When I step back and look at the bigger picture, the appendix debate is about more than just one organ. It's about how we handle uncertainty in medicine. Do we always choose the most aggressive solution to eliminate risk? Or do we allow space for less invasive treatments, even if they carry the possibility of failure? Medicine is often presented as black and white, right answer, wrong answer. But in reality, it's full of grey zones, and appendicitis is one of them. That grey zone forces us to confront our values. Do we prioritize safety at all costs, or do we embrace flexibility and choice? And maybe that's the lesson here. Appendicitis isn't just a medical emergency. It's a mirror reflecting our deeper fears. Fear of pain, fear of surgery, fear of the unknown. How we respond to it says as much about us as individuals as it does about the organ itself. So here we are, standing at the crossroads of treatment. We've talked about the appendix itself, its mysterious role, and the tug of war between antibiotics and surgery. But let's slow down for a moment and really ask, what's the right path when appendicitis strikes? First, let's be clear. Not all appendicitis cases are created equal. If the appendix has ruptured, if there's an abscess, or if imaging shows advanced infection spreading through the abdomen, the decision is simple. Surgery is non-negotiable. In those moments, antibiotics aren't enough to hold back the tide. The appendix has to come out, and quickly, or the consequences can be deadly. But when it comes to uncomplicated cases, when the appendix is inflamed but hasn't yet crossed the point of no return, the choice becomes more complicated. Antibiotics may be an option. For some patients, that means avoiding an operating room and all the risks that come with it. For others, it may mean a temporary solution with the looming possibility of recurrence. This is where patient education and shared decision-making matter most. Doctors can no longer just say, "This is the way we've always done it." They have to sit down with patients, explain the pros and cons, and let them play a role in choosing their own care. I find this fascinating because it signals a shift in medicine. For decades, appendectomy was one of the most common surgical rites of passage, almost like a badge of adulthood. You got your appendix out, you swapped stories with friends, and you moved on. But today the conversation is different. It's no longer just about cutting, it's about context. What's right for this patient at this time with these specific risks? That's a more nuanced and, in my opinion, more humane approach. But the story doesn't stop there, because when we zoom out beyond the appendix, we're left with a much bigger, more unsettling question. How many other parts of the human body have we misunderstood? For years, tonsils were routinely removed from children with sore throats, until research showed that in many cases, tonsils play a key role in developing immunity. The gallbladder, another organ often dismissed as expendable, actually has a hand in digestion. The more we learn, the more it seems like the body rarely builds something truly useless. Maybe the appendix is just the latest reminder that we shouldn't be so quick to dismiss what we don't yet understand. This realization forces me to reflect on the nature of medical knowledge itself. Science isn't static. What's considered fact today might be challenged tomorrow. The appendix used to be a medical punchline, the organ everyone mocked as unnecessary. Now it's the center of a debate that reveals just how complex and interconnected the human body really is. That thought both excites me and makes me uneasy. Excites me because it shows how much more there is to discover. Uneasy because it reminds me how easily we can fall into patterns of certainty that later prove incomplete. If the appendix, something we've studied for centuries, can still surprise us, then surely other mysteries of the body remain hidden in plain sight. So what does all this mean for you and me? On a practical level, it means if you or someone you love ever faces appendicitis, you should know you have options. Don't be afraid to ask your doctor questions. Don't be afraid to weigh your own values against the risks. Do you value certainty and closure above all else? Surgery may be your path. Do you value avoiding the knife and are willing to accept some uncertainty? Antibiotics might be worth considering. There isn't always one right answer, only the right answer for you. On a deeper level, though, the appendix teaches us something about humility. It's a reminder that the human body isn't just a machine with replaceable parts. Every organ, every tissue, every microscopic interaction may serve a purpose we don't yet fully grasp. When we reduce health to black and white answers, we risk missing the shades of grey that carry real meaning. Personally, I think the appendix is less about the organ itself and more about what it represents. The tension between tradition and progress, between safety and risk, between certainty and curiosity. It forces us to look at the bigger picture, not just in medicine, but in life. How often do we cling to old assumptions simply because they feel safe? How often do we ignore new evidence because it challenges what we've always believed? And that brings me to you. If you were diagnosed with appendicitis tomorrow, what would you do? Would you take the certainty of surgery or gamble on antibiotics? There's no judgment here, only an invitation to think about your own values, your own tolerance for risk, and your own trust in science. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, not just for me, but for everyone listening. Because the more perspectives we share, the more complete our understanding becomes. Just like the appendix, your voice may play a bigger role than anyone realizes. When I step back and look at everything we've uncovered about the appendix, I realize this tiny organ holds a much larger story about how we think, how we treat illness, and how we face uncertainty. For so long, the appendix was dismissed as useless. It was the butt of jokes in textbooks, the first thing surgeons pointed to when explaining vestigial structures. But now we know better. It plays a role in immunity. It may serve as a safe house for the gut microbiome. It has more value than we once gave it credit for. And yet, when it becomes inflamed, it turns into a ticking time bomb. That contradiction fascinates me. An organ that's both helpful and hazardous, protective and destructive. To me, it's a reminder that the human body is never one-dimensional. It's a network of trade-offs, balances, and hidden purposes. Nothing is as simple as good or bad. The debate over antibiotics versus surgery captures this perfectly. On one side, you have the promise of a less invasive option, one that spares the appendix and avoids an operating room. On the other side, you have the reassurance of a definitive cure, surgery that removes all doubt but at the cost of losing the organ forever. Neither path is perfect. Both have risks. And that's the reality of medicine. It's rarely about absolutes, and it's often about navigating grey zones with as much wisdom and honesty as possible. My personal takeaway is this. Medicine, like life, demands humility. We should question our assumptions, even the ones that feel most secure. Just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it's the only way. And just because new research challenges the norm doesn't mean it should be accepted blindly either. The truth usually lies somewhere in between, waiting for us to wrestle with it. For me, the appendix is more than just an organ. It's a teacher. It's a symbol of curiosity, a call to never stop asking questions about the world we live in and the bodies we inhabit. It challenges me to stay open to new evidence, to admit what I don't know, and to resist the temptation of easy answers. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If you were diagnosed with appendicitis tomorrow, would you choose antibiotics or surgery, and why? Your answer doesn't just matter to you, it matters to this community. Share your perspective in the comments below so we can all learn from one another. And if you found this conversation thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to The Wellness Way. Every subscription helps this channel keep exploring the mysteries of the human body, uncovering the hidden truths and sharing insights that just might change the way you see your own health.